Hello, everyone, and welcome into another edition of the WST Bombers Report. My name is Connor Hrabchak. In today's episode, the Bombers are on bye, so we won't be talking about a game that they played, but rather we'll be talking about their upcoming game next weekend against the Edmonton Elks. We'll break down the Bombers at the bye at 8-7, the rest of the CFL standings, and how the Bombers can really hit the ground running over the final stretch here and improve their chances of making it to the Grey Cup, which is here in Winnipeg. But before we get into all of that, we are going to talk about Zach and I's thoughts on the CFL rule changes. Those changes happened prior to last weekend's game, and the Bombers won 40-3, so we didn't really find any time to talk about our thoughts on the rule changes, but we're quickly going to give our thoughts on the rule changes in today's episode. What we like, what we don't like, and all of the above. So without further ado, let's bring in Zach Schnitzer from Bonfire Sports, my co-host here on the WST Bombers Report. Zach, how are you doing today?
Connor, I am doing great today. My NFL team, the Detroit Lions, not only won because good teams win, but great teams cover.
Nice.
The -10. It was dicey for a second there. They were only up by 11, but then they caused a safety on Jake Browning for Cincinnati, got the ball back and kneeled it out. And our WST winners parlay, my friend, is in play with David Montgomery getting 64 yards. Scatabo got his 3.5 receptions. So we're just waiting on James Cook, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the NFL Winners Show Friday mornings live on the Winnipeg Sports Talk YouTube channel. That has been going for a number of weeks now. Hustler, Pat, and Jake, they have an absolute blast outlining their picks for the week on WST winners. But this is the WST Bombers Report. And before we get into this week's game for the Blue Bombers, coming off of that massive 40-3 win, going to Edmonton to take on the Elks on Saturday, October 11th at 6 p.m., there were rule changes that we didn't talk about, and I feel like we have a unique advantage when talking about the rule changes, Zach, for one reason in particular. When the CFL announced it on Monday, the Bombers played on the Saturday afternoon, but the Monday before that, they announced it. That week was just so much talk, so much discourse. Stuart Johnson was doing interviews on every single, sports media station, including Winnipeg Sports Talk, which we really appreciate the commissioner coming on. He was doing so much, there was just so much talk and a lot of anger and a lot of discourse around the CFL rule changes. But now that you and I didn't talk about it then, but now we're talking about them now, I feel like we've all had a chance to breathe. We've all had a chance to think about it a little bit more. And obviously there's still, both sides to the equation. And you and I are going to get into that. So the rule changes have been well documented on what they are, but let's just roll through them quickly once again. The CFL outlined the changes for 2026 being the modified Rouge, the automatic play clock, and the team bench location. So the modified Rouge, you no longer can kick a field goal and miss through the back of the end zone or punt it through the back of the end zone and be given a point. If a player still catches a missed field goal or punt in the end zone and takes a knee, that will still be a Rouge, but it's for kicking it out of the back of the end zone. That is no longer a point. Automatic play clock. This was a big issue. The play clock's 20 seconds right now, but the refs need to blow it in. They need to set it. It results in a lot of inconsistencies. That's what the CFL kind of outlined their reasoning for it. And that's going to be when the ball is dead and the play is over, a 35-second clock starts. And that is how long you have to run the next play. And then the last one, team bench locations. There are a number of places in the CFL, BC, Toronto, where the bench locations are on the same side. They will be on opposite sides in 2026. Quickly on the 2026 changes before we get into the 2027 changes, Schnitzy, which are more of the structural changes to the game. Which ones do you like and which ones do you not like? And what are your reasonings for all three of those there, the Rouge, play clock, and bench locations?
Yeah, for the 2026 changes, I actually like all of them. I never necessarily had a problem with the Rouge because I always thought even if you won the game on a missed field goal like Liram Hawrylahou did last year, I believe it was a 49er that he just hammered through the end zone. Yep. I always thought of it as rewarding field position because of the size of the field, and we'll get to that in a second. The size of the field being what it is in the CFL, field position is key. And if you can make it to the other team's end and kick it through the end zone, well, you get a point, and that's fine. However, if a playoff game or the Grey Cup ended on a Rouge. You know, if it was the Bombers that won, that would be great, personally. But I think as a fan of the CFL, as maybe a newer fan of the CFL or someone who is trying to get into the game, especially an American, it's a joke. You cannot have that, in my opinion. And I think that possibility outweighs everything else. They have been trying to get this changed in the rules committee for years, and the rules committee won't budge. Mike O'Shea is one of the guys on there. And I think this is one of the key reasons why Stuart Johnston didn't bother going through the rules committee. You know, like, this was kind of unilateral. He had his little cabal of people, and they made this change. And I don't mind it, because I think if you consult everybody, first of all, it's going to take forever. And second of all, you're not going to get the rules through that you want. Like Mike O'Shea I love Mike O'Shea, but he would never allow a change he would never allow a change to any of these things.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with the Rouge. I think you keep the Rouge, you keep the spirit of it, but you don't have a potential embarrassment of a championship game on CBS in the States being decided by a single point. Automatic play clock, I absolutely love. I have for years been either watched on TV or, as you do, Connor, at the stadium.
Yep.
And you see the previous play blown dead, and then the referee can take anywhere from 10 to 15 to sometimes even 30 seconds to spot the ball.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the game clock's going the entire time. Just for fun, last night, the Lions-Calgary game, I was just sort of timing the amount of time it took the ref to spot the ball on the next play, and it was around 16 seconds. So this 35-second play clock makes perfect sense. I think that's what's happening anyway, but I think it will speed up the game. I think you'll get more plays in. And the only thing with the automatic play clock that I think is problematic is really the 3-minute warning, because I think fans immediately, and rightfully so, were concerned that a 35-second play clock would get rid of the drama of the 3-minute warning, which is one of the hallmarks of the CFL and why it's so entertaining. You then saw Chris Edwards, who's an executive with TSN, come out on Twitter and disavow that. You know, he said that they would still stop the clock. Right. And yes, it's 35 seconds, but this is going through the rules committee to sort of iron this out. I'm not concerned about it. I think the 3-minute drama will remain, and that's absolutely fine. I think it will make the CFL look a little more professional and polished to have that 35-second clock start right away when the previous play is over, and you will get more plays, and hence you'll get more points. And then the team bench locations, I think that's the one that everybody could agree on.
Yeah, like these, I don't even think we need to talk about the bench locations. Like, why on earth would they ever be like? And again, it doesn't have to be mandated, I guess, to be on opposite sides.
Right.
But like, again, this is not a groundbreaking discovery that they're making here. But the substitutions, I do think, play a huge role in this, because when and CFL players, former CFL players have brought this up too, when the bench locations are on the same side and you're at one end of the field, you know, maybe going to your short yardage package, you have, you know, offensive lineman, defensive lineman, your extra offensive lineman that's running like 50 yards down the field because they're on the complete opposite side. It just makes no sense. And even last night in the BC Calgary game, there was a moment where the benches are on the same side and they had to run all the way down to make a defensive substitution. They didn't get it off in time. Calgary ran a play and BC was flagged for too many men, offside, all the above. So Calgary just got a free play because of the bench locations. And it's like, well, anyways, no one's really disagreeing with that. So that I think is the one unanimous decision that Stuart Johnston made, was to make sure that the bench locations are on opposite sides. But the play clock... Yeah, go ahead.
Just on the bench, I have to say this, only because Toronto was eliminated yesterday. Ryan Dinwiddie is infamous now this year because the benches were on the same side versus Edmonton in Toronto a few weeks ago. Toronto won on a walk-off field goal.
Right.
And Dinwiddie, who'd been chirped at all game, I guess, by Edmonton, started like feigning a field goal kick, like just swinging his leg, and then in his press conference was like, yeah, like enjoy the offseason, Edmonton. Even though they had the same record, and this was entertaining. I loved it, but it sounds ridiculous now because now Dinwiddie is the guy eating crow because his team's been eliminated. And as we'll get to later, Edmonton is in play. So the benches on the opposite side will mitigate some of these ridiculous antics, for one thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that you brought that up because Dinwiddie, the Argonauts are eliminated from playoff contention now. And after the game, he did say that to the Edmonton Elks. But we'll get to that a little bit later on. Just really quickly, because I think the bigger discourse comes around the 2027 changes, and we'll get to that in a second. My thoughts on the 2026 ones, I agree with you entirely on the Rouge. I think it's unique to the Canadian game, and it's still here. They're not taking it away entirely, and you remove the off chance, which I know is an off chance, and that's people's biggest thing. It's like, okay, well, this doesn't really happen very much, and it's a reward for field position, and I get that. I still just don't want to see games decided by missed field goals, and I'm okay with that change. I know it's okay that if you're not okay with that change, but I'm okay with the Rouge sticking around. It's unique to the Canadian game. You can still get a single point. That's something that you can't do in the NFL. It's just less likely to get that single point going forward. The automatic play clock, I couldn't agree more. I think is a slam dunk. Well, I shouldn't say a slam dunk. I am worried a little bit about how the 3 minutes will go. I know that TSN directors have brought up that they're going to still stop the clock. And the more I think about it, if you are trailing in a 3-minute scenario and the play ends and the ref spot the ball and the clock is stopped, you're hustling to the line to go anyway. So the clock is stopped anyways, and you're at the line, the ref spot the ball, clock starts, and you're running your play. Like there's no real difference there if you're the trailing team. It's just more if you're the leading team with the ball. I don't know, if the ref spots the ball really quickly and starts the game clock and the play clock is at 30 seconds, can you then bleed 30 seconds? Like I think there's a little bit there that I need to see that in action, but my initial gut reaction to it and more thinking about it is there will be more plays during the game, outside of the 3-minute warnings, and therefore more offense, and that's always a win for me. And it's just a standardized play clock too. It's not putting it on the refs to be 17 seconds or 23 seconds to spot the ball and then start the clock. It's just the same every single time, which I like. I'm okay with that.
If I can just jump in on the 3-minute thing, Connor, I think you make an interesting point there. And I think sometimes if you're the trailing team, we've seen some criticism of the CFL in the last 3 minutes this year, and there have been times where a trailing team, bleeds off all 3 minutes of the 3-minute warning, and it's dink and dunk, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of urgency. And I do prefer the CFL over the NFL. I am an NFL fan, as I just talked about earlier, but I love the 3 minutes. I love the CFL. I love 3 downs. I love the width of the field, 12 guys ratio, all that stuff. What you do get in the NFL is that insane urgency under 2 minutes. Team maybe has 1 or 2 timeouts, but they have to go really quickly. And sometimes they have to take big swings, throwing the ball deep. And what I don't love in the CFL is the amount of QB sneaks that you see. I think it's boring. Now, sometimes it's high drama, if a team doesn't get it, but the lines are 1 yard off. So it's kind of a gimme, and I think it's boring. And I would like to see less of it. So I wouldn't have a problem with the 3 minutes changing slightly for a team to have a little bit more urgency if the play clock is longer.
Yes. Okay. Interesting. I hadn't even really considered that. And it's something that the play clock, I'm very much a fan of, my gut reaction. But as with all of these rules, I think it's safe to just put a qualifier on it that my opinion will probably change after seeing it in action. I think especially the 2027 ones, like I have my thoughts, obviously, as everyone does. Everyone has their thoughts, whether either you love them or you hate them. But I think all of our opinions can change once they actually happen. And the play clock is something that I have really high hopes for. And my gut reaction tells me that that's something that I think will work and should work. So the 2026 changes mostly get a yes from me and you in terms of the Rouge. We both like it. The automatic play clock, we both like it. Waiting to see a little bit more with the final 3 minutes, of course. In the team bench locations, the one thing that I think everyone's unanimous on and doesn't really make an impact on the game except for substitution and things like that. The biggest discourse and the biggest uproar of rage from CFL community, whether it's valid or not, has been from the 2027 changes. And that is when the goalpost location goes from the front of the end zone to the back of the end zone. The field size, the 55-yard line is no more. It goes from 110 yards to 100 yards. There's a shortened end zone from 20 yards to 15 yards. Now, this standardizes end zones across the league. Not every CFL stadium had exactly 20-yard end zones, so every CFL stadium can fit a 15-yard end zone. That was something that Stuart Johnson brought up, played into their decision for that. And the shortened field, again, 100 yards. I don't know why it says shortened field size twice on that graphic, but it goes from 110 yards to 100 yards. Your thoughts on these, Schnitzy? Because I think these are the big ones. These are the structural changes in 2027. What do you like? What do you not like from what we'll see from the Canadian Football League 2 years from now?
I like what you said, Connor, about having to see some of these things in action. Mm-hmm. So I think you're totally right. And I'm willing to be patient on these rule changes. I know they're dramatic, and I know that people's backs are up, and, you know, people are patriotic about Canada, especially now with what's going on in the States. You know, the timing isn't great here. Mm. But I don't think about Americanization. I think that is... I don't think that is the end game here. I think, but we can get into that later or another time. The rules themselves, it's funny because when Stuart Johnson made that sort of ominous announcement that he was going to make major changes to the game, and it was going to be announced the next day.
Right.
I was like, what is going on? Like, are we going to 4 downs? Are we getting rid of the ratio? Are we expanding to Birmingham again or St. Louis? You know, what has happened? Are we losing the width of the field? And I think everybody was freaked out. Like, I don't think I slept well that night. And when it came down that it was these changes, I thought, hold on a second. Okay, these are pretty dramatic, but you still got 12 men on the field. You still got the ratio. You still got 1 yard off the ball. You still got the 65-yard width of the field. You still got the Rouge. You still, in my opinion, have what makes the Canadian Football League Canadian. And maybe it was because I was relieved we weren't going to 4 downs and losing the ratio that I was like, oh, these aren't so bad. So maybe if the messaging had been different, I would have been more upset about these things. To be honest with you, and I'm not even sure why, but I'm fine with all of these. First of all, I think it all comes from the goalpost location. So the goalpost changing location to the back of the end zone is what necessitates, in theory, the shortened end zone and the shortened field. And if you buy that, then I think you're happier and you understand these rules. I think where there's debate is this whole thing about, 60 more touchdowns per year if the goalposts are moved to the back of the end zone. Now Stuart Johnson has talked about the analytics they did. I know Steve Daniel was involved. I'm sure they have some data. 60 touchdowns sounds like a lot, Connor. And you've had players come out and say, it doesn't really make a difference where the goalposts are. And then you've had other players are like, no, this is great. Like, whether you're coming out of your own end zone or you're in the red zone, these goalposts get in the way. And, we know the history of the goalposts getting in the way. For Cody Fajardo in the 2019 West Final, where he doinked one to end the game. That was great for the Bombers. But let me tell you what wasn't great for the Bombers. And Ed Tate was talking about this on WST a couple weeks ago, Connor. This was probably before you were born. But the 94 East Final against Baltimore that Winnipeg lost 14-12, there was a play in the fourth quarter where Dunnigan had Gerald Wilcox wide open in the end zone that would have won the game, and it doinked off the goalpost. And so, the goalpost giveth and the goalpost taketh away. And I remember being a young kid in 94, and I'm like, why is the goalpost there? That's ridiculous. Like, I think they like the uniqueness of the CFL and its quirks. That's a quirk I don't like. Like, even if it only happens an infinitesimal amount of times, imagine a Grey Cup's decided like that against your own team. you don't like that, right? So I I've seen different stats. Nothing that says there's going to be 60 more touchdowns, but I've seen some people like the guy from Bryson, our buddy from PFF, talk about how teams do throw the ball less in the middle of the end zone compared to the middle of the field outside of the end zone. So according to his metrics, and he tracks everything, that's a real thing. And then you have other people that are saying no, like there isn't a difference in terms of throwing attempts location in the end zone versus not in the end zone. So I think that's going to be a wait and see, but I don't mind it. I'm willing to give the CFL the benefit of the doubt on that one. The NFL changed them, I believe, in 94. They used to be in the front of the end zone in the NFL. I mean, a lot of these rules, like the Rouge and the goalposts at the front of the end zone, are from rugby. I mean, that's where this game came from, is rugby. And I think it's kind of cool that the CFL in particular has retained some of these things from rugby. I don't think this is one we need to retain. I don't mind moving to the back and seeing what happens. Now, just to finish my thoughts on the next two, Connor, I think if you're willing to accept that the goalposts being moved to the back are going to improve scoring and improve the game, and you're going to get more dynamic red zone packages, then it does make sense that you're shortening the end zones, because kickers now have instead of having an extra 20 yards to kick a field goal, now it's only 15, which goes into the field size. Now you've knocked off 10 yards, and so you've added 15 for the kickers, but you've added 15 for the kickers, but you've knocked off 10 from the middle of the field. So it sort of mitigates moving them to the back so that the kickers, so scoring remains at its current pace. I think that's the hope. So when I see those in context, that they kind of come as a package, right? The end zones themselves, for other reasons I like. First of all, I think it's ridiculous that BMO Field in Toronto has an 18-yard end zone. And then you have that ridiculous sort of polygon shape in Montreal and McGill. I know people are like, well, what about baseball? Every wall is different distance from the plate. I'm like, that's baseball. This is football, where it's more about precision, especially in the passing game. Like it bothers me to no end that the end zones aren't aligned. And again, just going back to the play clock thing, I think this adds more polish and professionalism to the CFL. You can be uniquely Canadian, but it should be a polished professional product that you are viewing. And by having all the end zones exactly the same, I think that adds to the polished nature of the game. And folks have to realize, like, this isn't the first time end zones have changed. Okay. When Canadian football started, they didn't even have end zones, Connor, because they didn't have a forward pass. They didn't need end zones. And then when they adopted the forward pass, with, by the way, I was looking this up, people at the time were afraid that the forward pass would cause, guess what I'm going to say now, Americanization, right? Thank God they were comfortable with being Americanized, because otherwise we wouldn't have a passing game, which is the most exciting part of the CFL. And the other thing so going along with that, the CFL into the mid 80s had a 25-yard end zone. They truncated it to 20 because they misjudged when they were building BC Place, and they didn't have room for a 25-yard end zone. So everybody just sort of became 20 yards to make it uniform. The shortened field is the one I don't love. And I think I have a fondness for the size of the field, both the width of the field, which I do think is more important than the length, but the length of the field too. It's not only unique, but there's just a majesty about it. It sort of matches the whole Canadian milieu, which is a massive country. It's bigger than the US in size. It's the second biggest country in the world. And then you have this massive field. So I will be sad to see that go on sort of an emotional and maybe I don't know, historical level. At the same time, as you said, I'm willing to see the effect on scoring. Mm-hmm. I am willing to eat the 55-yard line if what the CFL is prognosticating is true. If there's more plays, if there's more touchdowns, if there's more scoring, if the pace of the play is better, that's fine. And the other thing that I will miss is the missed field goal return. I think it's one of the most exciting plays in the CFL. You saw it firsthand, Connor, with that Trey Vavel 128-yard missed field goal against Ottawa, which really, in some ways, was we talked about a couple of weeks ago, could be the catalyst for the Bombers' entire season turnaround. It was just insane how important that was. And then he got another missed field goal return, 199 yards total, and set a CFL record, which, you know, unless someone breaks it in the next year and a bit, it's never going to be broken. So, I'm mostly happy with them, and I'm willing to give the CFL a pass and see how these things turn out.
Yeah, I thought that was well said. I'm mostly with these rule changes as well. I'll just say that. And I get the thing I hate the most is the shortening of the field. And again, I think the width is more important than the length when it comes to the distinction of the CFL game from the NFL game or the American game. The width, I think, is more important. But the length, like the 55-yard line, was still something that was symbolic with Canadian football. And I do think that is really going to suck not having that. Mm-hmm. So that's the one thing in all of this. It's probably my least favorite part of it. But I can also see why when you're moving the goalpost to the back, that if you kept the end zones the same and you kept the field the same, kickers would basically be no more. Like they would be kicking from very far away, or there'd be a lot of yards that would have to be gained to get into field goal range, especially with the end zones. You're cutting off, or you are cutting off 5 yards, but there would have been another 5 extra yards with the goalpost moving back as well. So, I don't know. The goalposts, I do think that there is a little bit, and I like that Bryson brought that up. I think there is a little bit of merit to what Stuart Johnson said about how 80% of pass attempts are to the corners. I again, just like eyeballing it or ballparking it with my own eyes, I could see how they got to that. I do think that teams are reluctant to go over the middle because of the goalposts. Now, how often does it play a factor in actual plays? I mean, we saw it in the West Final and the one you brought up from 1994, but I mean, at the same time, it doesn't hit the goalpost very often. Like, I can see why people aren't happy with that either. My take on this is I'm happy with them. I'm excited to see what the CFL can do with them. I really don't like the 55-yard line not being there anymore because I felt that was something that was symbolic with the CFL game. But in totality, with all of these rule changes, they didn't change any of my deal breakers. And the closest thing to that for me was the 55-yard line, and that's even pushing it a little bit. Again, as someone who's younger and isn't very, like, I'm not as nostalgic about the CFL game as other people are. And I still recognize that the 55-yard line is like, you go to a CFL game, maybe it helps that my seats are essentially in the upper deck right on the 55-yard line, but like that is CFL football, right? So that to me is really a miss, if you will, but I can see how they needed to do it with the rest of the changes that they were making. As for the goalposts, I'm okay with it. The shortened end zone, I'm okay with it. And again, I'm excited to see what these changes result in, because if it results in more offense, if it results in more touchdowns to the middle of the field, more offense in the middle of the end zones, and a more fun game, more efficient game, more polished, professional, I'm okay with it. I'm very much okay with it. And those are really my thoughts, like in totality with all of these rule changes. There was nothing here that was, the ratio, the 12 players on the field, the width, the yard off the ball, all of these things that are really the Canadian game, which was the 55-yard line as well, which, like I said, got very close to a deal breaker for me, but not quite. But none of those things really changed. It's still a very distinct game from the American game. When you're watching the actual players on the field, run the waggle, like that is something that I think.
Yes, the waggle. Good point.
Like all of those things, right? So I'm okay with this. I'm okay with these rule changes.
You're cautiously optimistic.
That's a great way to put it.
Just with the one thought I had, Connor, about the shortened field. I had wondered. So they ostensibly knock the 10 yards off the middle of the field.
Yep.
So that, as you said really well, right? So that kickers aren't basically obsolete.
Yeah.
However, I wonder, and Derek Taylor was talking about this, so I'll give him credit. Could they have not just changed where they spot the ball? In other words, to mitigate the extra 15 yards that kickers need to kick, could you not have spotted the ball on, say, instead of the 40-yard line when you take the ball after a score, make it the 45 or the 50-yard line? Could they have not advanced the ball further to mitigate that? I thought that was an interesting idea that Derek put forth. Now, on the other hand, optically, I don't know if it's great if a team starts on the 50-yard line, like
almost midfield. Yeah.
Midfield, right? And so I don't know that would look great. So it's an interesting thought. The other thing I'd like to, just with the end zones, just to put a bow on the end zone part.
Sure.
I don't know if you remember Canada Stadium, but what they had was the end zones were blue. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you see this in the NFL. And again, timing would be terrible to introduce this now, because it'd be like, 100-yard field. Oh my God, it's turning into the NFL. Goalposts at the back, and now you want to color in the turf of the end zones. And this isn't because it's in the NFL, although it happens to be. I love the end zone turf being a different color. I think it makes the field pop. It looks distinct, and I think it raises the drama of getting that ball across the goal line when it's a different color. I love them. I wish they would bring them back, and maybe they will, although, as I said, it would look bad optically with the Americanization people. I don't know what you think, but I just love the different colored end zones.
Yeah, it's something that I'd like them to maybe experiment with. It doesn't have to be a permanent thing, but maybe when the Bombers are wearing their, W jerseys on the front there that are all blue, maybe they have a fancy end zone for it as well. I know that the NFL is a lot more in terms of resources to be able to paint the end zones and then change them back and all those things. And it would be easier to keep it permanent. But if they were able to somehow do that for some special occasion, one game a year or something, or do some fancy Banjo Bowl logo in the Banjo Bowl or during the Banjo Bowl in the end zone, something like that would be cool. But again, it comes down to resources and what the CFL is capable of as opposed to the NFL. But that is an interesting thought for sure. I think that's a good place to leave the rule change discourse. We've already gone a little long on it. I mean, we outlined our thoughts. We understand why people are angry with it and nostalgic about the CFL and don't want it changed and don't want it to become the NFL game. And I share all of those concerns. The second the CFL goes to 4 downs, if that ever happens, I'm out. I think the CFL understands that as well. I don't think that is something that they're interested in. At the same time, Stuart Johnston didn't really help his case when he didn't rule it out entirely. And I get that from his perspective a little bit, of not just outright saying never to anything. And maybe that's a personal policy for him. But I do think that messaging and the headline from 3 Down Nation being Stuart Johnston doesn't rule out change to 4 down, like that's just so tough. And I feel like that really turned a lot of people off when it came to these rule changes, because I feel like in the moment, a lot of people shared what your thoughts were, Zach, in terms of, these aren't that bad, but are they is it just making it easier to go to 4 downs? And I think that concern still exists for people. And when Stuart Johnson came up there and said, well, I won't ever say never, that kind of hurt it a little bit. In his kind of press tour, if you will, over the past week and on Winnipeg Sports Talk, he said many things, had many quotes in terms of, we have no thought of changing any more rules, Americanizing the game any further or anything like that. And I believe him. So I'm choosing to believe Stuart Johnson. I'm choosing to have faith in Stuart Johnson and be cautiously optimistic with these rule changes. But Zach, we need to preview this upcoming Bombers game. They are taking on the Edmonton Elks this week in a big game for the Bombers. They won 40-3 against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Their best game, most complete game of the season by far, going into the bye week. And now coming out of the bye, they're going on the road against a desperate Edmonton team, fighting for really their playoff lives in the West, looking for that crossover game for Edmonton or a playoff spot. I mean, we'll see how these last couple of games go here. But here's how the numbers kind of shake out. The Bombers are 8-7. The Edmonton Elks are 6-9 on the season. Passing yards per game, the Bombers 238 to Edmonton's 223. Rush yards per game, 121 for the Bombers to 98 for the Elks. Points for per game, 26.9, so almost 27 points per game for the Bombers, 24.2 for Edmonton. And then points against per game, the Bombers are at 24.9 and Edmonton's at 27.5. And Zach, what would you say if I told you 24.9 points against per game is tied for second best in the CFL by the Bombers?
I would say you and I are not surprised, my friend.
Yes, we've been talking about this.
Yeah, we've been touting the defense almost the entire season. Outside of the struggles at the beginning of the season, Connor, against big passes, right? We talked about that last week, particularly against Calgary and Toronto. The Bombers have really locked it down on the back end. And I think that's something that you can take on the road. You can take defense on the road. So I think that's a huge advantage for the Bombers. I think this is a massive, like obviously every game in the CFL is massive because there's only 18 games and every game in football is massive. But this game in particular just feels huge. The Bombers win this game. A couple things happen. One, they secure a playoff spot.
Nice.
Two, all they have to do is keep pace with BC because they have the tiebreaker on BC and BC is red hot right now. If they keep pace with BC, you're talking about a home playoff game at Princess Auto Stadium when fans and myself included were wondering whether this team would even make the playoffs, talking about the end of the dynasty and all those things. Well, here we are. Winnipeg has a chance to have a home playoff game. Now, it's not first place. I get that, which is disappointing. But you have a home playoff game against Nathan Rourke, for example, who's never beaten the Bombers at a loud and screaming, raucous madhouse on Matheson, as Darren calls it. I think that's great. And but you have to beat the Elks here. You have to keep pace with the Lions. Now, there's some numbers historically that make this favorable to the Bombers. Okay. Collaros has a 12-game win streak against Edmonton as a starting quarterback.
Okay.
He has not lost against Edmonton since, when did I put it here? August 2018, Connor.
Wow.
When he was a quarterback, August 2nd, 2018, when he's a quarterback with Saskatchewan. Against Edmonton, he has 22 touchdowns and 10 interceptions for a 70% completion percentage. That bodes well. And then if you look at Fajardo, well, Fajardo has a career about 70% winning percentage. Guess what it is against the Bombers? And let's not talk about that Grey Cup, Montreal Grey Cup, because that's included here. But overall, against the Bombers, he has a 25% winning percentage against the Bombers. So the Bombers, like just the historical numbers, Connor, this is a favorable matchup. Edmonton's coming off the bye, which is usually a good metric. But this year, Edmonton's 0-2 off the bye. Now, on the flip side, Fajardo has really turned this Edmonton season around. Okay, Edmonton started 1-6. They're 5-3 in their last 8. Fajardo is 3-1 at home, and Collaros is 2-4 on the road. So, you know, on the flip side, there's some numbers that maybe favor Edmonton. Edmonton is absolutely desperate. They don't have to technically win out to make the playoffs and eliminate Calgary, but they do at least have to go 2-1, and they're at home. They're probably going to get a decent crowd. So, you know, it's Thanksgiving weekend. So I would expect them to come out desperate. I think when I think about Edmonton, though, they're a very odd statistical team, Connor. They essentially have the worst D in the CFL. They give up the most yards per game. They're vulnerable to the pass. They've allowed the most passing TDs. They've allowed the highest pass efficiency rating. They allow the most pass yards per game, highest completion percentage per game, and they allow the second highest second down conversion. Okay, worst time of possession and they have the least amount of interceptions. So on the surface, you're thinking this is a team that Winnipeg could destroy if Collaros is on point. Now, you saw Collaros last game on point against Hamilton, where he shredded Hamilton, had his best game of the season, Connor. Mm-hmm. And then earlier in the year against this same Edmonton defense in week 4, he shredded them for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. There was that period where they, in the first half, where he had 3 straight drives with touchdowns, 2 to Dembski, 1 to Wheatfall. So Winnipeg's offense has gotten in trouble when they've turned over the ball. That's been the story of the season. It really comes down to Zach not throwing picks, which isn't just on Zach, but the offense not throwing picks. And I think it's a favorable matchup because Edmonton's defense has the least amount of interceptions made in the CFL. They also have the second least turnovers generated in the CFL. So I think from a passing perspective, I think Collaros, because Edmonton has a decent rush defense, I'll give them that. Guys like Nick Anderson are particularly good against the run. But I think if Winnipeg's offense can continue to ride with Zach Collaros' hot hand, I think there's a path to victory there if they can be efficient and not turn the ball over. I don't know what you think about Edmonton's defense. I'll get to their offense in a second, but the defense is the worst in the CFL.
Yeah, and I think we saw that earlier on in the season, and the Bombers and Elks one and only matchup against one another so far this season. Like, Edmonton's offense in that game did hang around. It was Trey Ford at the time at quarterback. There were many question marks at that time of the season about Trey Ford's ability to be the quarterback of the team, and then they ultimately made the change to Cody Fajardo, and things have changed since then. But the defense, I should say, is an area where I think the Bombers, I'm really looking for them to pick up where they left off against Hamilton. Maybe not 15 yards per attempt, like not that efficient, because that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But to put up another 30-point game would be awesome, to carry that confidence through, to show that the bye week helped get healthy and establish some more chemistry with a wide receiver room that's been banged up and in and out of the lineup and all of those things, and a running game that's hitting its stride as the season goes on. And the defense for the Bombers, I'm not nearly as worried about. I thought that game against Hamilton was an absolute masterpiece, and I'm quite confident in them carrying that through. I'll be watching the offense against this statistically league worst defense, looking for them to carry it through. And I think both sides of the ball, the Bombers should be the better team. Special teams, they've been great this year as well, the Bombers. I think this is a game that they should win. What do you think about the Elks offense, just to close out the game preview?
So the Elks offense is very interesting. So let's not talk about the first 7 weeks of the season with Trey Ford, because I think that's in the rearview mirror. I think with Fajardo at the helm, they statistically are also the worst offense in the CFL, Connor. Now, I think some of that is skewed by Trey Ford's struggles, because he had games where he was absolutely brutal. So I think if you looked at the last 8 games, I don't think they'd be last in almost every statistical category like they are overall. But they are, even with Fajardo, like last in the CFL yardage-wise passing, least passing TDs, most sacks allowed, smallest average gain on first down, even though they're a decent running team, worst time of possession, second least 30-plus yard completions, Connor. But despite that, Fajardo has the best completion percentage in the CFL and the best passing efficiency in the CFL. What that tells me, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, is this is a classic Cody Fajardo, like dink and dunk, high percentage passes marching down the field. Now, they don't have a lot of points. So this efficiency isn't necessarily turning into points. So I think if the Bombers can limit the gain on first down, the Elks, I wrote it down, have the least or second fewest first downs, passing first downs. So if they can limit Justin Rankin, I'll talk about him in a second, but if they can limit Justin Rankin, limit the run game on first down, put Cody into second and long, and I don't think he's going to be able to march down the field again and again and again against this Bombers defense, which the hallmark of which is they have the best completion percentage against, or the lowest completion percentage against. So the Bombers secondary can lock it down. They often rush three. Guys like Woodby are your extra Sam in there. There's a bunch of DBs. They take away the hot route. They take away the deep passes. And I think Cody will struggle. I do think there's a path to victory for this Bombers defense. Here's maybe the red flag for me is Justin Rankin. I have been watching the Edmonton's running back Justin Rankin the last few weeks, and I know he's not like leading the league in rushing, but keep in mind he was sharing carries with their other running back, Edmonton's Javon Leake. But he's on pace for over 1,000 yards. You know, his longest run is 90 yards. He has 8 touchdowns. He has 25 10-plus yard runs. He has the most 20-plus yard runs, Connor, with 11. This guy is absolutely electric. I don't think we're talking about him enough, Connor. I think if he had been the primary running back for Edmonton from the very beginning, and maybe he wasn't, especially because Trey Ford likes to run, I think he'd be leading the league in rushing. I think he has this amazing and rare balance. Like he reminds me of Derrick Henry, just a smaller CFL version of Derrick Henry, because he has that power, Connor, but he also has that scat back ability to make guys miss and that breakaway speed, both running the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield. I think he's the key to the Edmonton attack, and I think the Bombers will have to keep him in check to have a chance. The last thing I'll say about the defense is we talked about that week 4 matchup where Winnipeg beat Edmonton. That was a tie game in the fourth quarter, 23-23, with Trey Ford at quarterback. And the Bombers kind of put their foot on the throat in a late drive. And if you remember that 9-yard Zach Collaros rushing touchdown, which was absolutely insane. One of the star players of that game, and I think arguably the star player, was Bombers middle linebacker Tony Jones. He had 6 tackles. He sacked Trey Ford, which isn't easy. And there was a couple screen passes to Justin Rankin where he can hit a home run that Tony Jones was able to stop. I really like the Bombers linebackers with Kyrie Wilson and Tony Jones. In that game, Hrabchak Cramdy had a forced fumble on Justin Rankin, which really deflated Edmonton. So I like the Bombers linebackers, and I trust that Tony Jones against his own team is going to be able to limit the effectiveness of Justin Rankin. But I just think this is a superstar in the CFL, and I as much as I don't agree. Want him to go off against the Bombers, I do tune into Edmonton games just to watch this guy because I think he's that good.
Yeah, he's electric. He's dynamic with the ball in his hands. He's such a fun player to watch. I totally agree. That is a player that the Bombers need to keep an eye on defensively, and it's going to be up to Kyrie Wilson, Hrabchak Cramdy, Tony Jones, who are great at playing sideline to sideline and tackling and making plays on players like that. It's going to be up to them to continue to do that against Justin Rankin, because if he gets the ball in his hands and you give him a crease, he could be gone. He could take it to the house, and he's just one of those players that has game-breaking, game-changing speed, and the Bombers definitely need to keep an eye on that. But we don't have the line for the game yet from our friends at Coolbite Canada that my hat shows here. But I think.
What do you think it would be?
Bombers minus 5.5, 4.5.
Yeah.
Like, the Bombers will be favored. I think there's no question about that. The Elks are playing desperate. They're at home. I think that plays a little bit. I can't see the Bombers being over touchdown favorite, even coming off the bye. I don't know. I think that's where we'll end up. But my point was, we don't have the line yet. I still think that the Bombers are going to be favored, and for a good reason, because their offense, if they can continue what they did last week or 2 weeks ago, coming off of the bye, I think that will be the key against this league worst defense. And then I have no questions or issues with the Bombers defense and their play over the last number of weeks. So the Bombers looking to go to 9-7 and put themselves in a good spot to potentially host a playoff game, which is crazy to say. If you went back and looked at our week 4, week 5 episodes here on the WST Bomber Report and told us and listened to us and told us that the Bombers might be in a position to host a playoff game, I tell you, you're crazy. But here we are. The Bombers have turned things around here, and it's in large part due to their defense, and their offense seems to be coming along as well. That's going to do it for us on the WST Bombers Report. Zach, anything else before we head out? And of course, we'll be back next Monday breaking down this Bombers Elks matchup.
I'm pretty jacked for this one, Connor. This is a huge game for the Bombers. They can really make a statement by beating the Elks again.
Yep.
Putting the Elks on life support. Although this is crazy, and I'm sure the guys at CFL 110, Hammer and Hustler will get to this, and you guys on WST this week. But if Edmonton goes 2-1 or wins out, and Calgary even goes 1-2 and loses to Edmonton, you're talking about a team that was 8-3 that had kicked the crap out of the best team in the CFL twice in the Riders. People were calling the Stamps the best team in the CFL in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
This is a team that is free falling. They've been embarrassed by the Lions twice, and they may not make the playoffs. That is crazy. In a 9-team league where 6 make the playoffs. So this is down the stretch of the CFL. This is just going to be great. Talk about your 3-minute warning of the season.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the races in the East, Montreal looks like maybe the best team in the CFL suddenly with Davis Alexander back at quarterback. Can Hamilton hang on to the top seed in the East? There's races in the West. As we know, the Bombers are in the thick of it, looking for that second seed in the home playoff game. We'll have you covered right here at Winnipeg Sports Talk and on the WST Bombers Report. Zach Schnitzer and I will be back next Monday breaking down this Bombers game against the Edmonton Elks. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button down below. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss all the new content we have here at Winnipeg Sports Talk. And we'll see you next Monday breaking down Bombers Elks. Enjoy the game this week, and we'll see you next Monday. Have a good one.